This technique is called, I got a silly name for it, steel fire. I've been trying to focus on inventing techniques that I can kind of do on autopilot a little bit. And so this one requires a little more thought to get it started. But then hopefully I should be able to talk a little more freely. Okay. Emmanuel, let me pick on you for a little bit.
Sure.
When you think about the state of the world in general, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic? Do you feel like we're going in a good direction, or do you feel like we're not going in such a hot direction?
Less than pessimistic.
Less than pessimistic. I feel like that's very common. Most people I talk to, that's what they say. And okay, so hold that thought in your mind, and I will now describe a scenario, or more a phenomenon. I read this book, The Turner Diaries, which is thought to be the book that inspired Timothy McVeigh to bomb the Oklahoma City building. And the book was remarkable, not because it was good. It was not good. It was actually quite spectacularly awful literature. But just the attitudes that were in that book were really fascinating to me. The guy who wrote it, or at least, I don't know if he actually felt this way, if he was just trying to make a book about this way of thinking, but the way of thinking in the book, which resonates very deeply with a lot of Americans, was that black people are going to get together with the government, and they're going to rape all the white women and lock up all the white babies. This is genuinely a thing people are concerned about. And I know because it's not just the book. The Vice did this series of articles on the KKK, which experiences a resurgence at the end of every war, partly because the KKK is one of the only people, showing up to these poor soldiers and being like, hey, we're friends now, you can hang out with us if you like. But so when this guy from Vice was interviewing these people from the KKK, they had similar sorts of ideas. They were genuinely terrified of this happening. And so, what does the KKK do in response to these fears that they have? Well, they go out into the world and they act racistly, right? They intimidate people, they do racist stuff, some of it's very violent. And I would not be the least bit surprised to find out that sometimes when the KKK runs around and does racist stuff, and they do mean things to black people, that some of the black people themselves become a little racist because some white people showed up with the express purpose of doing harm to them because of the color of their skin. So the world did indeed become racist and violent as the KKK predicted, but only because the KKK predicted it. The world would have been perfectly fine if, however they managed to do it, they just felt more positively about it. And now I'm going to jump to a seemingly unrelated scenario. You're taking place in a medical study, and they're injecting you, and your symptoms improve. And so you think to yourself, oh, geez, they must have given me the real deal there. But later that day, a statistician is looking through and notices you, the test subject, and in fact, you were in the control group. All they gave you was salt water. They didn't give you any meds at all. Yet your symptoms generally did improve. What's happening there? Well, that's called a placebo. And the placebo is one of the most well-documented effects of the human psyche. And it's remarkable when you think about it. Just by believing that you will become more healthy, statistically speaking, in general, you do. In fact, the effect is so powerful that every single medical study has to account for it. And so your health is, to a surprising degree, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the point I'm trying to make here is that indeed the state of the world is more of a self-fulfilling prophecy than you would think. The attitudes and predictions that we take out into it are more likely to come true simply because we believe that way. Which brings me back to this idea of pessimism. I feel that our society is, in general, quite pessimistic. And I feel like that's not really doing us any favors. I feel like an attitude of pessimism, if you're feeling very pessimistic about the world, you're liable to say things like, well, you know what, that's never going to change. We're never going to fix that. Well, yeah, I mean, it's never going to change if everybody says it's never going to change. And also to this point of, like, that's never going to change. I like it when people make that point because I have an easy, obviously true refutation of it, which goes like this. Imagine yourself picking up a history book and opening it. And what do you notice but change after change after change? So this idea that change will never happen is just flat out wrong. Now, it is valid to say that might not change for 20 years. And that can be a lifetime to a human. And it can be kind of upsetting if the things that you are upset about take that long or longer to deal with. But still, you know, it still happens. But so people who are pessimistic might say, well, yeah, Dave, I hear what you're saying, that, you know, maybe a more optimistic attitude would cause me to, you know, get more done in the world. But listen, my pessimism comes from a space of realism, right? The world actually is a pretty awful place. Just check the news, you know? And to that, I would say, well, I'm not so convinced, actually. If you want to know the state of the world, you know, you got to go dig into the details and check the statistics. And the fact is that on the issues that we've known about for some time, we're actually making remarkable progress. And you know what? It would be instructive, it would be constructive if we could go through the list of things that people tend to be afraid of, but I'm only just going to pick a couple, sort of demonstrate my point. And one that I've been thinking about lately is polar bears. And, you know, from Al Gore's film, right, we're all terrified that polar bears are going to go extinct or something like this due to global warming. But, you know, you can look this up online. In fact, I just did the other day. Polar bears are doing well. They're actually doing pretty well. There are more polar bears today than there were 10 years ago. There's somewhere in the ballpark of 20,000 polar bears in existence. It's not so bad, actually. You know, we shoot something like 600 polar bears a year. If we want to talk about, you know, what are we going to do about the poor polar bears, you know, it seems to me it's pretty clear that the answer is to stop shooting them. And anyway, they're doing fine. What's another example? I've been thinking about malnutrition a little bit. And you have to double check me on this. It's a little wishy-washy. I forget the numbers exactly. But it's something like, in the ballpark of 50 years ago, half the world was malnourished. And today, that number is less than 20%. So here we've actually made some quite remarkable progress on a few of these issues. And I feel really good about that. So yeah, to everybody who's feeling pessimistic out there, this is, I feel like I'm trying to give you really good news. I'm trying to give you the best news I know how to give. Listen, we're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. Civilization is not going to collapse. We're very troubled. Yes, there are problems. If you look at the state of the world today, there are problems. But look at how bad they were where we came from. There's every reason to be optimistic going forward, right? Optimism and pessimism is not about, is the world okay right now? Optimism and pessimism says, where's the world going? And it seems to me the world's actually going in a pretty good direction. So, you know, if you enjoy feeling very worried about the world, if you're the sort of person who gets just like a real thrill out of watching Fox News, and I have a theory about that, then go ahead and, you know, keep thinking that the world is falling apart. That's fine if you want. But, you know, if it sort of upsets you to be concerned about the, you know, the world that your children are going into, well, listen, you know, you don't have to be upset. We're actually doing okay. Yes, there is work to be done, but listen, if your news source is making you upset, just like put that news source down for a little while. Don't worry about it. You know, get your head in a right space. Get positive, and then come back and rejoin the conversation. How much time do I have?
You're at 9:24.
9:24. Okay. I don't want to take too much time, but let me, just for fun, I got a few more examples of self-fulfilling prophecies that we can talk about. One is, one of my favorites is abstinence-only education. Abstinence-only education says that sex is extremely terrifying and dangerous, and your best bet is just to avoid it altogether. So I watched a documentary about this once, like some some abstinence-only quote educators, and you know, they would say things to the kids like, condoms are only effective 84% of the time. That means 16% of the time they just don't work. Therefore, condoms are just not really that good. Those are terrible odds, and it's best to just avoid sex altogether because condoms won't help you. Well, you know what the kids did in response to that? They kept having sex. They just stopped using condoms because, condoms don't work. So look, yes, in those, and this bears out in the statistics too. In abstinence-only education jurisdictions, the kids get pregnant more often and they transmit diseases more often. But the whole reason that sex became more dangerous for these kids is that the people, quote, educating them about it knew it was dangerous. So if we just calmed down and gave them a few facts, we could rectify the situation. What's another of my favorite examples of a self-fulfilling prophecy is the war on drugs, specifically as it relates to marijuana. Society was so convinced, and this is changing, of course, thank goodness. Another thing to feel positively about. Society was so convinced that all these drugs were so horrifically awful for you that we should just make them illegal in the hopes that nobody would ever do them. But of course people kept doing the drugs, but it did become extremely hazardous for your health to do drugs such as marijuana because you were liable to get thrown in jail. And that's about one of the worst things you could ever do to a person. So there's another example. Alright, I should wrap this up and give this painting a title. This one's turning out pretty good too. I like this sort of this is only the second painting in this style that I've tried. I photographed some tombs or some graves outside of San Juan, and it's got this real kind of Old Testament feel to it, or maybe I don't know, Russian propaganda kind of feel to it. Anyway, I thought a good title for this painting would be "The World Will End in 2013.
Be warned.
Be warned. By Dave Smith. Oh, look at that. That's wonderful.